Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for around about the next 45 minutes or so. This morning we're looking at Sage 50 accounts. Specifically, we're looking at the departments area within the software. So we'll be looking at all aspects of the functionality of that within Sage 50. Now, we'll quickly run through a little bit of housekeeping just before we get started this morning. So as normal, you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you do have a microphone, you will find that it's muted automatically. You find you can't unmute yourself as well. So any questions that you have for us this morning, you'll need to pop them in via the questions panel. To access that, you just click on the little speech bubble icon, give it a click. It'll expand the panel and you can start typing any comments or questions in that box at the bottom. Remember to click send, otherwise we won't see them. So if you're sat there wondering why you haven't got an answer, that may be the reason why. So do make sure you click send. If anyone wants a copy of today's handouts, so copies of the slides that we're using today, not a lot of information in them, to be honest, but they are available to download should you want them. You will find the detailed information available in our help center if you do need more in-depth and sort of step-by-step guides, that type of thing. Now, as normal, the webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be included on your follow-up email, which you will receive round about an hour or so after we finish the webinar today. And that will, as well as today's recording, it will include a link to our previous recordings as well. So well over 100 different topics covered by those. So those are available if you've never really used webinars before. And it will also include a link to our webinar registration page. Our timetable currently runs up to the end of April. So do have a look through that. We'll tell you about some new webinars that we've got starting next week. So opportunity to earn your next digital badge. So I'll tell you more about that towards the end of the session. So as I say, watch out for that email. You'll get that round about an hour after we finish. Right, let's take a quick look at what we're covering in today's webinar. So we're going to start with a little bit of an introduction, so a little bit of background to maybe why you would use departments in the first place and maybe what you would use them for as well. We'll look at setting up your departments. Nice, easy task, that one. It's just really a case of adding a description. We'll look at defaults as well. So when you're using Sage accounts and you're entering transactions, where does a certain transaction type pick up its default department from? You'll always be able to override that default, but it will pick up a default. So sometimes if you might be processing transactions and you keep changing it time and time again. So why not just set a default once you know where it picks that up from? Saves you a few clicks here and there. Obviously, we'll look at entering transactions. So again, where are they getting that information from, and how does it differ if you are using departments, and what options have you got? We'll then touch on reports a little bit as well. Maybe just point you in the right direction for those. And then right at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support that's available for you, outline some of those upcoming webinars we've got, quite a few new topics starting from Thursday this week, so from tomorrow. And then obviously if there's any outstanding questions, we'll open up to those as well. But keep your questions coming. We've got Matt on hand today. I'm sure he'll try and pick up as many questions as he can. So you may get a straightforward answer. It may be a link to a detailed article from our help center. Or if it's a bit more complicated, maybe something we think, well, actually, you'd be better discussing that with our support team. You may be advised to get in touch with those. But we'll try and pick up as many as we can. Right, now before we get stuck in, what I'm going to do is I am going to pop a poll on your screen. So if you don't mind, if you could take part, I'll pop that on now. And simple question, do you currently use the departments option in Sage 50 accounts? So some of you will probably have used it for quite some time. Others, you'd be thinking, right, well, I've seen a departments option, but what's it all about? And you're here today to learn about what you can do with it. The ones that have used it, you may be thinking, well, actually, maybe I just want a little bit of reassurance that my understanding of it's right. Maybe you're fairly new to it still, so maybe you'll pick up some tips along the way as well. Excellent. So most of you have voted there. So I'll just close that poll. And surprisingly, just at the very last second as I close that poll there, I'll share the results with you. You can see it's a 50-50 split. So it's about just under 80% of you voted there. So 50% saying yes, you have used departments, so you currently use departments in your software. The other 50 saying no. So we got a nice even split there. I thought it was slightly in towards the yeses there just before I closed that poll. Right, let's hide that. We'll get cracking. Right, okay, so let's start with a little bit of an introduction then. So obviously for those of you that are using budgets currently, just do bear with me while we cover it in a little bit of, I suppose, the basics before we get started. I'll just jump past a slide there, so or I'm missing one possibly. No. Right, so first of all, departments. It is available in all variants of Sage 50 accounts. Now, when we talk about variants of Sage, I'm not talking about versions, I'm talking about different levels of the software. So the three variants that are available are Sage 50 Accounts Essentials, Standard, and then there's the professional level as well. So obviously the higher up you go, the more features that you gain in your software. If you're not sure about what you're using, you can either just on your toolbar, on your title bar of the software, let me just show you that one. Just share my screen for a second. So on my title bar here up the top, it says Sage 50 Accounts Professional, and that will be followed by your company name. So you're either going to have it say Sage 50 Accounts Essentials, Standard, or Professional. If it doesn't say anything, you're just going to be on the standard level as well, which is the middle, what we term the middle variant. So that's a nice, easy way for you to check there if you're not sure. Right, pop back to the slides. Now, use-wise for departments, most people will think of sort of traditional different divisions within your company, like a sales department, purchasing department. You might have shop floor, delivery, admin, board of directors, that type of thing. So you got what you would term your traditional departments, but it could be used for different divisions of the company. It may be different branches. So if let's say you've got two branches, you're in different locations, it means that when you're entering transactions, anything relating to location 1, you would use an appropriate department. Anything for location 2, you use a different one. And that means you can then report on that. So everything's merged into one for the company as a whole, but you can split it because you've enabled that by adding sort of a department level analysis to each of your transactions. But there are loads of other uses as well that I've seen used over the years. It might be you might just use it for the sales area. So when you're selling goods or entering invoices, that type of thing, you might break them down as a sort of a public sale, a retail sale, a trade sale, depending how you want to, again, what analysis you want. You might do by region as well. I've seen it used for employees. So having your different managers set up as a department number, maybe different teams or a salesperson, so you can calculate different things. I suppose the most common alternative use of departments over the years has been projects. Now, the projects module itself, which on the screenshot you can see is just below the departments option on the toolbar. Projects ledger itself is something that's only available on the professional level of the software. But in the past, I've seen departments used for projects, but one of the limitations of that is you've got your departments runs from 0 to 999. So essentially you've got up to 1,000 departments, and that's the limit. Now, once you've used that, there's nowhere to go other than to restart, sort of recycle the department numbers and start using them for something else. So normally these days, we'd always recommend, rather than use departments in that way, you go down the projects route, which again, you need to be on the professional level. But it could be anything. It's whatever you want to use it for. It doesn't have to be traditional departments. The one thing to think about is when you're entering transactions, it is one department per transaction. If you need to break it down, then, so let's say, for instance, you enter a bank payment, then you'd need to break that down into separate lines so that you can specify the relevant department per line of the breakdown. Charlotte, you mentioned there, can you use it for products? Yeah, you can do it for that as well. So your product records themselves, we'll be having a look at that in a few minutes, where you can use it against customers, against suppliers, against products, against invoices. It's whatever you want to use it for. But have a bit of think about, is there a limitation with your reporting? And what is it you want to get out of the software? So, and that might help you determine how you want to use it. Gavin, you mentioned there as well, if you've previously used a department number, can you reuse it with a different description? So departments, it's really irrelevant to a certain extent. The description is just a name. The department number is sort of the fixed bit of information, sort of what I suppose what you term the critical field. So when reports are on, it's based on the department number, not the description. So yes, you can rename a department, which we're just about to have a look at as well. Right, we'll move on then. So we're still looking at sort of, I suppose, the basic setup of departments. So you'll access that from the departments option on the toolbar down the left-hand side towards the bottom. When you go in, all of the departments are set up for you so that they are there by default. So it goes from 0, which is obviously the default, all the way to 999. So essentially you've got potentially 1,000 departments there. Now the reference can't be amended or deleted, so you can't get rid of an actual department. You can reuse it and change the name of it, which the name itself is up to 60 characters. You can change the name at any time, but you can't get rid of a department from the list. Within the department record, you've got the text box as well for notes. So you can add as much text there as you want. And if you are on the standard level of Sage 50 or the professional level, you've also got on the memo tab, you'll have what you term the document manager. Now, I've never seen anyone actually use the memo tab, the document manager for departments. It's more likely you would use it against likes of maybe your products, or if you're using product records. So you can attach different documents to those particular records. So as I say, not really seeing it used against departments, but it is there. Now, one thing you can do, and this is something you'll see when we start entering transactions and selecting departments, is that you can apply a filter to hide departments that aren't in use. So if there's any that don't have a name, or maybe you've entered some text just to say, right, sort of void or something like that at the beginning of the name, you could apply a filter to then hide those. And it just means it's a bit streamlines the list a little bit, makes it easier if you've got a great big list of them, that you would just makes it a little bit easier to select them then, as the ones not in use will be hidden from that list. So let's have a quick look at that, and we'll quickly have a look at the departments list, and we'll add one and show you how you can apply a filter as well. So departments, as I mentioned, it's on the toolbar here, just about towards the bottom there. And this is my list. So it goes from 0, and if I do scroll all the way down, you can see it goes to 999. So let's use the ones at the top. Now, you don't have to necessarily, the first available one here is number 8. It's got no description. I don't necessarily have to use that as my next one if I don't want to. I can, let's say I want to go for department number 10. I can do that. Now I can either highlight it and click edit, or if I just double click it, it will take me into the record as well. And all I need to do at that point is give it a name. So I'll just say delivery. As I mentioned, you've got the notes box here, so you can click in there and you could add any notes you want to add. So again, just a text-based field, that one. And on the memo, again, you've got the option to add additional documents. So you'll find this one, if you're on the standard level of Sage 50 or professional, you'll find this available throughout the various records in Sage. But going back to that details tab, that's all I need to do. So remember, it's up to 60 characters for the name. All I do at that point is I just save it. Now this one here, I'll do number 20 as well, just so I can show you the filters in a bit more detail as well. So we'll just double click this one. If I just put my name in this time, so I'll put that as the department name and I'll save it. So you can see we've got some gaps here. Now what that would mean is when I go to, I just went into customers as an example, and let's say we were entering a batch invoice. When we come to the department column, it means if I'm looking for mine, it means I've got to scroll all the way down to try and find it. So I've got loads of them that just aren't in use here. Again, if you've used it for other purposes, you might think, well, actually, I don't want that one to be displayed. I don't want people to start selecting it. So what we can do, if we just discard that for the moment, close out, is go back into departments and we can click the filter option. And if I do a nice easy filter, this one, there's nothing set up just yet. And I'll do where, we'll call it department name. Now you could obviously click on the drop down and scroll down for it, but if you know what it's actually called, what you're looking for, the field that you want to apply the filter to, you could type the first letter of that and it'll start sort of scrolling through those that begin with that letter. So we do where department name, and I'm going to say is not equal to, and then in the value, I'm going to leave it blank. So what I'm looking for are departments where they've got something in the name, where the department name isn't blank. So if I then apply that, close out, the other departments are still there, so I can still use them at any time if I know what number I'm after, and I can obviously switch the filter back off. But at this stage, I've got the active departments listed. Now, if I wanted to revert back to the full list, I can go to filter, clear it, click apply, or we can leave that filter set up in the background and we could just toggle it on and off. So this is like the on-off switch for a filter. So I'll leave it switched on. What that means is when I go to enter, let's say a transaction, we'll go into a batch invoice. And this time, when I access the department dropdown, I get the compacted list there. So I'm only seeing the active departments on that list. Again, if I needed to, I could switch that filter off even within the dropdown. Switch it back on and back to that compact list there. Let's just clear that for the time being as well. So nice and easy to set up your departments. Now, where can you add them and what options do you have? So if we pop back to the slides, we're going to now have a quick look at the sort of the default area. So the departments behind the scenes. So the first thing to pick up on is the settings menu. Now, there's a number of options within the settings menu where a default department is stored. First of all, we'll cover configuration. So when we go into settings and then choose configuration, we can then go into the custom fields area and you've got an option for departments. I'm going to show you this one very quickly before we go through the other defaults. So back to my screen, we'll go into settings, configuration. Let's click yes to close the other prompts. And then if we go into the custom fields tab at the top, now at this stage, yours might look a little bit different because it will be dependent on the level of the software, but also your screen resolution can have an impact on the way that the options are listed along the top of the screen there. So we pop into custom fields, and at the bottom here, we've got the custom field for department. Now, some of you may be familiar with custom fields, or often referred to as analysis fields. So you can change the title of the text. So if I change this from department to, let's say I was using it for something else, and let's say I want to call it, let's say I'll say sales rep here, and we'll just OK that. If we now go into a customer, I'll go into a record, and if we go into the defaults tab, you'll see that text is transposed into the record itself. So it's whatever you type in there. If you've thought of another reason other than traditional departments, then you can change that just so you know what gets recorded in this field. You know what you're selecting. But I'm assuming the majority of will use it for traditional departments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename that back. So back into settings, configuration, custom fields at the top, and I'm going to set it back to department. I'll just OK that. So we now go back to that customer record, into the defaults tab, you'll see that text is changed back. Right, let's head back to the slides for a moment. So as I mentioned, there's a number of other options where default departments are set. So you can set a default department for customers, suppliers. You've got an option within your bank defaults, product defaults, and also to do with your invoice and orders when you're updating your invoices to the ledgers. Let's have a quick look at those then in the software. So again, back to my screen, and we'll quickly run through these. So we pop into settings and then customer defaults, and you can see the department here is set to number 1. Now what this is used for, and the rest of these options here as well, they're used for when I create a brand new record. So if I add a new customer, it will pick up these defaults for me, save me having to select it. So if I'm going to maybe creating a batch of customers that I think, well, I want the default department to be, let's say, department number 3, I can specify that. And when I create those new records, it will pick that up for me. Saves me selecting it each and every time. What these don't do is they don't impact on existing records. So if I've got this customer, which was set to department number 1, it's not going to change that. It'll still be department number 1, even when I set this customer defaults area to department 3. So it uses that when you set up a new record, or maybe if you imported a new customer record and you hadn't specified a department, it would pick this up instead. So we'll just OK that. Now you've got similar options for suppliers. Again, you can specify a default department. Go back to settings. You've got what? I'll come back to bank defaults in just a second, but we'll start with product defaults next. And again, in here, we can specify a default department. Again, as you add new product records, it will pick that up, but you'll still be able to override it at that point. Won't change it for any existing records. Going back to settings, we'll pick up bank defaults this time. And you've got 2 default departments in this area. So there's one for payment defaults. So this would be used where you go to enter the likes of a bank payment, and it would look at this area to say, right, well, the bank payment, which tax code, nominal code, and department do you want to pick up by default? So it'll fill those boxes in for you. Again, you'll be able to override them. We'll see in a moment when we start entering some transactions. But that's where you can set that. Now, this is a fairly new option, the bank defaults, to include this. I think it's from version 29 up over. You will have this option. You've also got it for receipt defaults as well, so you can specify a default department. So let's just choose that department number 20, and when we enter a bank receipt in a moment, you'll see how it should pick that up. The final option to mention, I'm going to come back to as well when we start entering transactions, and it's within settings, invoice and order defaults. It's on the update ledgers tab, and it's this little setting here, update using customer department. I'll come back to that one when we start entering some transactions, when we get onto the invoices and orders area, just so you can see what that actually means. Right, let's start with customers. Now, in customers, we just pop into a customer. So we'll pop into this one. And you'll see most of the records will have a defaults tab. So on the defaults tab, we can specify a default department. Now, all your customers can obviously, it's only one department per record for the default. You'll still be able to change that when you start entering transactions. And we can come in and change this department at any time as well. So if everything is set to department 0 on your accounts, because you, again, 50% of you said you weren't using departments yet, it means that you can come in into the relevant records and you can start setting those. Now, you don't have to do them one at a time. So we'll just close that. If we wanted to set our customers to say use a certain department number, or maybe we want to split our customers. So some of them we think, well, yeah, some of them I want to department number 1, others I want to allocate to department number 2, which would be a common reason for that one might be if you're using sort of a department for, like, say, a sales rep, you might want to reallocate certain customers to a different sales rep, so essentially to a different department number. Now, you can do them one at a time. It's easy enough to go into that record and into the defaults tab and change it and save the record, move on to the next one. But if you're on the standard level or the the professional level of Sage 50, you have what you term the batch changes option. So if I highlight a few records, so we'll choose the first 5 as an example. If I wanted all those to be department number 3, what I can do is I can access the batch changes option. You might have this listed as a separate icon on your toolbar. You don't have this if you're on the essentials level, but I choose batch changes. It brings up what I would term a skeleton blank record. Now, by that, it's basically a blank record, and some of the fields will be grayed out, meaning that you can't amend that, but others will be sort of still active, so in the dark black font there. And on the defaults tab, the department number is one of those. So I can say, right, those ones I've got selected, what I'd like to do is allocate them to department number 3. So I do that, click Save. Tells me you've chosen to make changes to multiple records. Do you want to save those changes? And I'll just choose yes. And that's it done. So really quick. If I go back into this A1 design, back into defaults, and you can see it's allocated to department 3. So nice and easy to change them, and potentially quite quick as well if you are using batch changes, if you want to allocate them in, well, as it suggests, in batches. Now that would be the same for suppliers. So we pop into suppliers, into a record. Again, you've got the defaults tab, you've got the department there. So you can either, again, you can change it individually, or if you've got the batch changes option, you can do multiple records simultaneously. Now, let's just get rid of that. Now, nominal codes and bank accounts, you can't specify a default department. So if we pop into a bank account, and in here, this time there's not a defaults tab. There's nowhere you can specify a default department in here. And that would be the same for if you go into nominal codes, into a nominal record. Very little you can actually specify in a nominal record, really just the name. So again, nowhere you can specify a default department. Right, projects, you can also specify if anyone uses the projects option. In here, you can, you've got the analysis tab. Let's go back to details. Can't see it for looking. Actually, ignore that one. It's when you come to enter transactions as well as a project, you'll be able to allocate as well as allocating a transaction to a project, you'll also be able to allocate it to a department. Right, any extra questions so far? I think we've picked I think we have 3 questions so far, so not many so far. What we'll now do, we're going to go back to the slides just for a moment. We're going to start looking at entering transactions. Now, very little changes when you start using departments. You have basically an extra column to complete. And as I've alluded to already, it will pick up a default department. Now you will still be able to override whatever default department it picks up, but it will be one department per transaction. So let's say we had a payment for £100. If we needed to split that payment between multiple departments, we'd need to enter that as a multi-line transaction. So we needed to split it, say 50-50 between department 1 and 2. We just need to break down the transaction, allocating department 1 on the first line, department 2 on the second line. Karen, you won't see anyone else's questions at the moment. We haven't published any to everyone yet. You'll only see the questions and answers when we submit them. Most of them I've just read them out and just given you an answer. Right, okay, so we're going to look at entering transactions now. So we'll obviously try and reiterate where it's picking that department up from. You will have a department column, which some of you may or may not be aware. You can, when you're entering transactions, you can show or hide columns. So if there's columns you think, well, actually, I don't use that, rather than have to tab past that field every time, you can just hide that column. Or once you gain a better understanding, if you think, well, I always just want it to accept the default and I don't want to change it, again, you could hide it. It will do that in the background. Right, let's switch back to my screen then and we'll have a quick look at entering some transactions. So we'll just start with customers. We'll do a batch invoice. And you've got the department column, and the department in this instance for a batch invoice, it's picked up from the relevant customer's account. So if I choose a different customer, you'll see the department changes. Now, it doesn't matter who I choose, it'll pick up the default department from that particular record, but I will still be able to change it. So even though this is the default department set in this customer's record, I can still click on the drop down and I can choose a different department if required. Again, it depends what you use it for. And it would just be a case of popping in the relevant values, etc., maybe some details, and then when you're done, you can save that. Batch credits are pretty much the same. As soon as you specify the relevant customer, it will pick up the relevant department from their record. Now, some of you will be one step ahead of me when we come on to suppliers. So again, when you do a batch invoice, as you'd expect, it'll pick up a default department. It picks it up from the supplier's record. But again, just like with all the others, I can change it if required. I can override that. Batch credits, essentially it's the same. Next one, we'll move on to bank accounts, and we'll pick up on bank payment first of all. So bank payment, and you can see we've got a department here. Now you'll see at this stage it's picked up department 0. Again, I can override this. I can just click on the department drop down and I can choose the relevant department if required. But remember this one we mentioned earlier. Just clear this for a second. If we go into settings, bank defaults, you've got the payment defaults, which currently the department is set to department 0. If I change that to say department 4, just okay that, and then we'll go back to enter a bank payment, you can see it picks that up. So that's where it, if you ever wondered things like the nominal code, the department and the tax code, where's it picking that up from? That's where, settings, bank defaults. You have a similar option for if you're doing a bank receipt. So again, we've got a department set there, which we can still override and change if needed. Now, one thing I do want to pick up on, if I just go back to customers. So remember this customer record, if we go into the record, and if we have a look at defaults, you can see at the moment, we've got this one set to department 3. I'm going to set it to 1 just for ease at this stage. Now, if we go and enter a batch invoice, you can see it picks up department number 1. That's what we just set it to. I'm going to set the details to test, and we'll just do, let's do £200. And what I want to do is I'm going to pay that off. So I'm going to do a customer receipt. Now, when we specify the customer, you'll see it pulls through the relevant transactions. Now, at the moment, it says department, it just says N/A. If I want to see that, I need to make sure I tick this box to see the individual item lines. So that's all to do with like transaction grouping, that one. So this invoice that we've just literally entered for £200 plus VAT, if I want to show that one and pay that off, so we'll pay it in full. You'll see there's nowhere on here that we can specify a department. If we want to attach a department to that specific transaction, the customer receipts, or if it was a supplier payment, be exactly the same, then what we need to do is you need to click the department option at the top. And then you can specify the relevant department that you want to assign to the actual receipt itself. If you don't, it'll default to department 0, and that goes for supplier payments as well. So let's just save that one. So that's probably that little thing to watch out for, customer receipts and supplier payments. If you want to assign it specifically to a department, you need to click that department button at the top and select it from the drop down. Next ones to mention are to do with invoices. And this will apply to order processing as well. So if you're on the professional level and you're doing sales orders, purchase orders, the similar theme will come through here. If we go into invoices and credits, and we'll do a new invoice, we'll choose our customer, which remember we just set this one to department number 1, and we'll choose a customer, a product. We'll just choose this one. And we'll pop in an amount as well. Now the department for an individual item, it's going to pull that through from the actual product record or the service record if you've got that set up. So if we drill down, we can see it pulls it through, in this case for department 7. Now it is per item line, so I could have as many different items on this invoice, all potentially using different department numbers. It will pick it up from the product record. So if I want to view it or change it, I can just click your little icon, or you can press F4 on your keyboard at that point, and it will bring up that edit item line, and you can view or change the department at that stage. Now remember this customer is set to department 1, but the item line itself is set to, I've forgotten that, department number 7. So this is where the setting came in earlier. Now, if I just save this invoice, and we'll select it from the list, and I'm going to update this one to the ledgers. So just give that a moment, close out. Now, if we go and have a look at that transaction that was just posted on the back of that one, you can see it's still picked up department 7. So it uses by default the one that's on the item line itself. Now, if I've looked at the analysis and I've determined the way that I want to use departments, and I think, well, I want to use specifically the department number that's assigned to the customer, this is where that setting come in that we touched on earlier. If we go into settings, invoice and order defaults, into the update ledgers, and it's this little option here, update using customer department. So if I tick that this time, okay that, we'll go and enter exactly the same invoice. So we'll choose that customer. I'll choose the same item. I'll give it a slightly different value this time. Now the item line itself is still picking up its department number from the product record. But this time when I update it to the ledgers, so this one here, update that to the ledgers. We'll just close out of the update ledgers report. We'll go back into transactions. And this time you can see the transaction is allocated to department number 1. So it overrides it. It ignores what that little, because of that little setting, it ignores the department number that's on the individual item line, and it replaces that with whatever is on the customer's record. So again, that will be a little bit of thinking about which one do you want it to use. Depends how you're going to be using departments. So I hope that makes sense. That's probably the most complicated setting of what we're covering in today's session. Now, if you have made a mistake and something has got the wrong department, or for those 50% of you that were thinking, well, I've never used departments yet, but I've just literally started my new financial year, and you're thinking, well, actually, could I go back and start amending departments? You can't do that. You can edit your transactions, and we'll need to come down to the item line area. Make sure you've got the right line selected. It's only one in my instance, but if we edit that, we'll then be able to specify and change the department if required. So we'll save the changes, job done. Again, keep your questions coming. We'll try and pick them up as best we can. So that just about covers most of the transaction entry. I think the one that we missed there was maybe journals. When we go into journals, obviously you've got that department column. We start entering a journal. Doesn't really matter what it's for. You'll see that it does just default to department 0. So again, if required, you can change that. It is one department per line of the journal as well. Right, the final area we're going to cover on the webinar this morning is reports. Now with reports, we pop back to the slides just for a second. The number of reports that you have will be dependent on the level of Sage 50 accounts you have, or that variant that we're talking about at the beginning. Obviously, the higher up the range you go, the more reports you're going to have available to you. There's some great resources available to you as well. If you've downloaded the handout, those links will work for you. So there's, if you're version 30 or above, there's the report finder within the software. The idea of the report finder is that you can start typing in keywords and it will try and sort of identify the report that you would be after. There's also within our help center, for those of you on version 29 and below, or maybe you're version 30 or above, but you still want to use the one in the help center, there's the Which Report Guide. Again, very similar. You can start typing in keywords to try and identify the report that you're after. And if you can't find what you're after, or it's something specific that you're after, then there is our report design service. Let's just have a quick look at the report. I'm just going to quickly pick up on Karen's question there. Karen mentioned there, does the department automatically adjust if you reverse a journal? So yeah, when you reverse a journal, it will include whatever the journal was allocated to department-wise. So your reversing journal would include that information. Similarly, if you edit a journal, you will be able to change that information as well, should you need to. Anyway, we'll pop back to my screen. And just to quickly mention some of the reports that you have available. I would encourage you to use the resources in our help center, as it will list what you can access. Now, in departments, and again, not every level will have this, but because I'm on the professional level, I do have the departmental profit and loss report available at the top of the screen. And that means if I wanted to, I could run a profit and loss for department number 1. I might want department number 1 and number 3 combined. So I'll make my selection and then run the report. Now, it will merge them. A lot of people think it will show those departmental profit and losses side by side. It doesn't. If you need that, you need to run them individually. Now, in general, when you are running reports, if we just pop into customers as an example, and we'll pick up on reports. And if I just pick on day books. Now, when you're running the likes of a day book report, you'll tend to find that some of them will say detailed and some will say summary. If you're running a one that says summary, when you run a report like that, you'll find that you've just got this criteria here. So it's top level information, what we would term header level information. Department, however, is recorded at what you would term split level, so the individual item line itself. So if you run a detailed report, I'll just preview that one, you'll see that in addition to entering a transaction number range and a customer range and a date range, we can also specify a department as well. So various options for that one. That means if I wanted a list of invoices allocated to department number 1, for instance, I can get at that information. But it must be the detailed one. It's normally detailed in brackets. When you run that, it will include department as part of that report criteria. Quick question from Claire there as well. Can you develop your own department reports? Yes. Or you could even just edit existing reports and maybe add in things like department information. So that definitely is possible. Right, any additional questions? If you do have any, quickly pop them in there now. Just about brings us to the end of the session though. If you weren't quite with us at the beginning of the session when we started, then if you've got any questions, you just need to click the little speech bubble icon and it will then expand that and you'll be able to start typing your questions in the bottom corner there. Remember to click send. Just to give you an idea of some of the webinars we've got coming up, and this is something that you may have heard a little bit about, and it's Copilot. We're starting webinars relating to Copilot tomorrow. So if you are interested and you want to find out what Copilot is all about and what it can do, just to help with your reporting in Sage and help you manage things like your debt and your stock levels, and help you monitor your business performance and things like that, then do get yourself registered for one of those sessions. From tomorrow, which is our very first session for Copilot, we're then going to be running that on a weekly basis. So do get yourself signed up. The link will be included on your follow-up email. Starting next week, we've also got our management reports webinar series. So with this, you can earn your digital badge. There are a number of topics, which I've got a little video that I'm going to play for you now. And that will outline a little bit about what we're going to be covering starting next week. So we'll set that going. I'll try and pick up some questions just while that's running through, and then we'll come back in just about a minute or two.
Exciting news, our next badge is available to book now. From April the 1st to the 11th, dive into our management reports badge and master everything you need to know about understanding management reports. We look at the foundations of your reports by looking at the nominal records, how to set these up and how they form the basis of your reporting, before delving into the chart of accounts and configuring that to your needs.
Moving on to the trial balance sheet and profit and loss reports, how to run these for your current financial year and how to run these into the future and for prior years. We'll also show you how to reconcile your aged debtors and creditor reports and how to account for any differences, before showing you your business dashboards, the perfect feature for monitoring your key business data at a glance.
Attend 5 out of the 6 sessions and complete our quiz to earn your badge. Your achievement will be added to the Accreditable portal, where you can share your badge with clients, colleagues and suppliers, showcasing your journey to becoming a Sage expert. Don't delay, get yourself registered now at sage.co.uk/webinars and take the next step in your professional development.
Okay, I'm back live with you at that point. So I've got a few questions come through, but hopefully if you are interested in signing up for the management report sessions, as I say, they start Monday. Monday next week. We're going to be running them over a 2-week period. So there's a chance to attend each of the sessions. We're running them twice each one. So do get yourself signed up. I'll come back to the questions in just a moment, just in case anyone's about to leave though. Many thanks for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it, giving you a little bit more insights into the workings of Sage 50 accounts and some of those options that you've got available. There will be a little survey pop up as you leave. If you can take a moment just to complete that, take you about a minute max, be greatly appreciated. So give us a score, rate the webinar, share any thoughts, ideas of what you'd like to see covered going forward or how we can improve webinars. Let us know. So do take that minute to do that for us. The follow-up email, which contains the links that you need to get yourself registered for other webinars and watch our previous recordings, that will be with you in round about an hour's time. Right, I'll just head back to sharing my screen and we'll try and pick up a couple of questions. So Karen, you mentioned there, can we look at the departmental reports? If I just quickly pop back to that area. There's a number of options for you. And again, we try not to cover reports in depth in this one because it does vary as to the reports you will have available to you, depending on the level of your software. So if you're on Essentials, for instance, or you're on the standard level, you won't have access to the departmental profit and loss icon at the top, or the one for the balance sheet for that matter either. But you can go into reports. There's different ones available there, so you can print out your department list. Just really depends what it is that you are after. Obviously, it links in quite closely with budgets as well. So you might have the advanced budgets set up by department in depth or the department overview option. Again, there are webinar recordings on that as well. So it's just a case where it's one of the reasons I encourage you to have a work through the the information that's available in our help center, or if you're on version 30, you can click within your reports area, you can click the report finder option, and you may find that you need to enable it. I haven't got my account signed up with a Sage account, this set of data, but for yours, it will just guide you through and it would ask you, what is it you want to report on? So have a good look through the information that's already available in our help center. There's another question there about, is there a standard report in Sage Professional to run age debt by department? Let's have a quick look at that one. So if we go into customers and then reports, and we run age debtors. So if we run, which one are we going to run? Let's just try this one. So I think what you'll find with this one is it's not going to let you specify at this point a specific department, but if you wanted sort of, let's say, a list of customers, their outstanding balances for a specific department, what we can do is go into the filter option, a bit like what we looked at in departments, and we'll just put where, let's find department number, it should be available. Let's just select it from the list, where it is, department code, and I'll say it is equal to, and I think we set something to 3 earlier, so I click apply, it will list the customers where I've specified or flagged them as department 3, and then with that selection, with those records listed, then we can go and run the standard age debtors report, and it'll just be based around those records that we've got selected there. So try that. Filter's a great tool, just adds a lot of flexibility to your reports. If you've never used it before, there are some great webinar recordings on using filters. Even if it's just things like hiding accounts with a zero balance. It's a very common filter to apply that one. Now I think we've just about picked up all the questions that we've had. If we've missed any, apologies for that. I'll have a scan through them once we've finished the webinar, and if there's any that we've missed, we'll try and get an email out to you. But just going back to that final slide again, we'll end the webinar just at that point. Once again, many thanks for coming along. Please take that minute to complete the survey before you pop out for your lunch. That'd be greatly appreciated, and hopefully we'll see you on some other webinars soon. Many thanks.